Hey everyone, it's Alex and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week. And before we get started, I need to tell you that I've launched a new channel called The Rivals Strategist. And Marvel Rivals is coming out on December 6th, and this channel is going to be dedicated to not only just generalized Marvel Rivals content, but more specifically about the strategists of Marvel Rivals. I'm creating a channel where I'm going to be specializing in support-based content for people that are interested in playing. I'll leave a link in the description and in the pinned comment down below. Join us there if you're interested in Marvel Rivals, and more specifically, if you're interested in watching me cover some support-based content for this wonderful upcoming game. With that being said, let's get started with deck number 1, which is a bonus deck. We actually have 11 decks this week, and it's Thanos Zoo, and this is a diner special. You're looking at this deck and you're like, Alex, this ain't all that special. It's Khazar, Blue Marvel, Devil. This is actually kind of like some old school Thanos here. It's running a 62% win rate right now in Deadpool's Diner. It is the top win rate deck, which surprised me, honestly. I was expecting to see Airsham or something else, but I think that you're seeing so much Airsham right now anyways that people are starting to counteract it with the Cassandra Novas and etc. Even Cassandra Nova and something like a Absorbing Man is crushing it. And so Thanos Zoo has some kind of like room to wiggle a little bit, and it's performing exceptionally well. According to Untapped, although these are relatively early Deadpool Diner statistics, it is the top based deck. So if you're looking for something relatively expensive, actually, I was going to say inexpensive. It does have Marvel Boy, Kyra. It has Mockingbird in it, Thanos, Gilgamesh. It's actually a surprisingly expensive deck. That's a conversation for another day about how damn expensive Marvel Snap is. I mean, it's a conversation for every day, to be honest with you. The game's too damn expensive. Hopefully they fix this card acquisition soon, because we got a deck here that's Zoo, and it's still incredibly expensive. Let's move on to the top 10 here, and we're going to be starting off with Airsham Thanos. Now, this was the top deck last week. It had a tremendous win rate, a tremendous cube rate, and then as it gained popularity, people were like, oh, we're going to have to counter Airsham again, and so they have. A 57% win rate and a 0.31 cube rate is nothing to scoff at, though. It's honestly performing very good. The key thing about it, though, is you can get Thanos out as early as turn 4, which is insane, at minimum turn 5, because well, it starts in your hand, and you got that extra energy to work with. The Thanos Stones themselves, they feeds into the Mockingbird synergy very effectively, especially since you're also playing cards you might not have started in your deck. Mockingbird is generally pretty much free. Goliath coming down on either turn 5 or 6 can be detrimental to your opponent's game plan. And I do like the Mobius and Mobius as well. I've noticed it being quite successful against like the bounce-based decks, which we'll talk about shortly, especially those that are running the Black Swan, because it prevents those 1-drops from being free on that final turn of the game, right? So a pretty interesting deck. It also features the tech of something like a Shadow King, and of course the fun of something like a Legion. I like this deck a lot. If you're interested in playing Thanos, and if you're interested in playing Airsham, this is one of the best combinations to do so, and it has been for 2 weeks. Moving on to number 9, it is Malekith here. Now, again, this deck does feature a new card in Malekith and a number of Series 5 cards, which is a little more on the expensive side. Again, there's actually a lot of Series 5. I cannot wait for these drops to happen coming in September. We should actually maybe find out next week about what's actually dropping, because they said they're going to give us 2 weeks notice, so that's exciting. But yeah, Malekith has been good. I even said in my review of it, and even on the Snapchat with Coccia, like Malekith is a surprisingly good card. Like, it's good. 4/6, bring something down, have a good impact. Obviously, Kate Bishop's a bit of a whiff on that too. So is Valentina to some degree. Bringing down Red Guardian, bringing down the Luke Cage, even bringing down Copycat can generally be pretty damn good. So I like this deck a lot. It is performing well. Surprising to see a Toxic style list that's not running Ajax. Instead, you're running a little more tech in this one here, especially when you consider what Red Guardian can do in the current meta. Shang-Chi obviously being an excellent piece as well. So, like this deck a lot, although I think there are some stronger performers on this particular top 10. Going into number 8, we have Classic Discard. Now, it's interesting to think that like there have been a couple different iterations of Discard that have been making waves. You've had the, obviously Fenris Wolf just came out, and Fenris Discard with Moon Knight doesn't make the top 10. Now, Discard's been pretty impressive over some time here, and there's been a number of different versions of Discard that have been performing very well. We have the Fenris Wolf Moon Knight style decks that are okay, but they don't actually crack these types of numbers into the top 10. You also have the Malekith versions of Discard, which are performing very well, just a little bit under on the cube rate and win rate compared to this particular deck, which is just straight up Apocalypse Scorn Discard. This is your dependable discard, and it's performing very well. 58% win rate, 0.41 cube rate. You'll love to see it. It's just a great, dependable deck. It puts up a lot of power. It has lots of versatility in it as well. You have multiple win conditions here. You can blow stuff up with the Gambit. You can ramp with the Corvus Glaive. I like it a lot. It's a solid deck. I've been playing a lot of discard lately, and honestly, I think its power potential is legitimate. It's a very good deck and one I think you can turn to, especially if you're looking to rank up in the current meta. Taking us to number 7 here, we're going to have Ronin. This is a brand new list for the week, and at a 58% win rate, 0.44 cube rate, it's astonishing how well it's doing. Now, a little bit on the new card expensive side, as it features not only speed, it features Malekith and Anti-Venom, which is a lot. But you do have the Master Mold, you have the Grandmaster, you got Hydration Robert, you have the tech against the Airsham and Thanos you're seeing with the Cassandra Nova, of course. Maximus, interesting as well. Maximus being effectively played on later turns so that you can fill their hand up against their will to kind of buff up your Ronin and your Mystique. But honestly, the deck's fun. Is it as disruptive as it could be? I mean, Master Mold isn't quite there yet. Like, yeah, you're stuffing their hand, but it doesn't generate enough power because honestly, 2/3 Sentinels are still good enough to play. So this deck is good. But I think just the supporting cast around Ronin needs a little more help. Because Ronin himself gets pretty big, honestly. It's good to see Ronin back in the list here. And honestly, it's performing very, very strongly. And that's going to take us to Wiccan Surtur at number 6, running a 58% win rate and a 0.46 cube rate. There's a couple interesting choices in this deck, including Baron Zemo, which obviously is going to be pulling the least expensive card in your opponent's deck. Right now, you are seeing a lot of Thanos, so you're pulling the Thanos Stone, getting an additional draw, which honestly kind of feels good in a deck like this because it helps kind of pull into your combos a little more effectively. But generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to play your Quicksilver on turn 1, your Cable or Hawkeye on turn 2. The Kate Bishop will allow you to kind of hopefully curve effectively into turn 3 if you don't have Surtur or Zemo. But generally speaking, you want to play Surtur on turn 3, and then with the Wiccan on turn 4, you can consider going Alliance, Magneto, or Arrow, or whatever combination you want. You have this extra energy. You're going to have the Kate Bishop arrows as well to help fill out these curves, and so like it tends to be a very effective strategy. Now what's interesting about it is that like you're really not running that many synergistic cards with Surtur, and it's interesting to see that it's performing as well as it is because you really only have 3 activators. But then you think to yourself, well, what does Surtur really need? You play it like you go, what, okay, 3/7, 3/10, 3/13. Like, how is that not crazy as it is, right? Even just having a 3/10 by playing 2 cards you would have played anyway on turn 5 and 6, that's just incredible power value, right? And we talked about this on the Snapchat where like there's often this fixation on trying to get cards to absolutely insane levels when they release on the onset, and Surtur was definitely doing that. And it's interesting to see that like you got a really good high performing deck that's really not leaning too far into Surtur. It's not like Surtur's like the star of the show. It is a supporting role here where it actually just steadily gains additional power through the play of Alliance, Arrow, and Magneto. So I do like this deck a lot, a good one, and it has some interesting curve potential, especially with the Malekith as well, which can provide you with some additional synergies, especially when you consider like Shadow King into Malekith and then they play into it. Very interesting deck. Just be careful you don't play your Malekith into your Surtur and Shadow King yourself, which is probably a bad idea. Going to our next deck here at number 5 is the Anti-Zemo. And you might think an Anti-Zemo, well, it's because you got Anti-Venom and Zemo. Maybe I could have named it a little better, but this is the second deck that has Zemo in it, which is nuts. I honestly wasn't expecting for there to be multiple Baron Zemo decks, but here we are. This one running Invisible Woman, which I thought was an interesting tech piece. You play Invisible Woman. Behind it, you can play Baron Zemo, which is interesting because then it'll delay like what card you pull and potentially increase the value of the card you hit, because at the end of the game, you might pull a 6 cost or a 5 cost that's remaining in the list and not necessarily a 1 or 2 drop if you played early. You got the Gladiator as well. You got Malekith making another deck, Malekith and Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom being used very often with something like a Luke Cage, of course. But generally speaking, just a high power output deck. And it's interesting that these decks that have like a lot of like tech options are performing as well as they are. Obviously, US Agent's been one that we've been praising for a while. Sage, very vertical power. But like, Anti-Venom, Malekith, the Shang-Chi, of course, Hydration Robert. Like, these aren't like, they're not crazy power plays, but yet all this tech you're utilizing is generating a 58% win rate, a 0.63 cube rate. Now, this particular deck had 240 games on it, so the sample size is much tighter. And but honestly, it was fascinating to see how effective it was. And so if you're looking to try something with amongst the highest cube rates currently, this is currently it. As we go to number 4 here, we're going to be going to our next deck, which is Screamdoll. Heimdall recently got buffed to a 6/8, and now with a 59% win rate and a 0.58 cube rate, we have Screamdoll, which is basically a Scream-style move deck featuring Craven, which we've seen in the past, but it has like this mix between Scream and Move, right? You got Cloak, you got the Craven, you got the Hydration Robert, and I found it interesting that Nebula was included as well, but then it kind of made sense. You could use Nebula, play it into one lane, play Scream into another lane, and it discourages them from playing into the Scream lane, because if they're playing into Nebula, you can then disrupt them with the Spider-Man or the Polaris or whatever else, or the Staggy, right? So it gave you options as to how you could utilize Scream to best effectiveness, while basically stealing their power, gaining it back, while also having the opportunity to play into Cravens with Heimdalls and arrows and things like that. So a very interesting deck, and it's not the last time we're talking about Scream. Scream has been a very consistent performer over the meta for like the last couple of weeks here, and it's pretty impressive to see. As we move to number 3, which is going to be Bounce. This should be no surprise. Bounce has continued to be one of the absolute top performers. Despite the nerf to Silver Sable still is a key component of this deck. I do like the versions of this deck that do run Black Swan. You also have the Toxin. You have the Hit Monkey in this deck as well. Beast obviously being the top end. Very notable here that I think that Sage is a remarkably underappreciated card, and I think that the vertical power that Sage can produce is remarkable. Age of Venom still in this deck. With the change to Age of Venom, bring him to he basically changes all the cards to a 3 power. You're no longer seeing the Iron Men making these decks, which is kind of interesting, but you are still seeing the Hoods and the Bishops and whatnot. So the deck has been largely untouched with some minor modifications, because Iron Man still good at, a 5/3 Iron Man is still amazing, but a 5/4 Iron Man was absolutely cracked. And so what you're seeing here is some minor modifications to make this deck a little more consistent. A 59% win rate and a 59 cube rate is remarkable, though. Like, that is an incredible line. And I mean, we just have one deck that has a higher cube rate than this, and it is a very experimental deck with a very small play rate. This deck has a massive play rate, so these statistics have been kept very consistent over a long period of time. So I think you can play this number 3 deck with absolute confidence. And that's going to take us to the number 2 deck, which is, well, it's Scream. We mentioned it before with the Heimdall Scream-based deck. Now we have the more traditional designed Scream-based deck, still performing exceptionally well. 60% win rate, 0.43 cube rate. Higher win rate, lower cube rate than the one we showed prior with the Heimdall. And this deck is running the cards that, like, honestly, I have felt a little unimpressed with. Like, Cannonball, I haven't been that impressed with. Kingpin, I think, has been doing pretty good in these decks, though Scream obviously is a far better card. But Kingpin and Scream give you a little more optionality, and obviously when you Juggernaut something, it increases the chances. You get a little bit of extra value from it. Spider-Man's the same way. Morales is a 4/6, makes this deck as well, which is great. Nice little bop up of power there that Morales got in a relatively recent, I was going to say a recent buff. It's been like a couple months, but it's nice to see Morales making these decks as well. But obviously a slightly different flavor of Scream. Again, better cube rate on the other one. This is a better win rate, but Scream has been a very consistent archetype, and honestly, it's been surprising how well it's done for how long it's been out. It has been very consistently a very high performer in the meta, and so Scream has definitely withstood the test of time. There's no question about that, despite the fact they had to get a 1-point buff because they changed the Juggernaut interaction, which is still somewhat awkward from time to time. And as we move on to our number 1 deck of the week, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been supporting me on our quest towards 100,000 subscribers. We are nearly there. Thank you so much to each and every one of you that has subscribed and supported my content through these years. We're going to make it in 2024. It's going to be an exciting moment, one that I've been waiting for a long time, just like you've been waiting for the number 1 deck of the week. And you're pissed. It's Loki Airsham at 61% win rate, 0.44 cube rate. It's funny because last week we had the Thanos version at the top. Airsham was crushing it. And I was like, hey, isn't it kind of interesting that, Loki's no longer the top performing Airsham deck? And then that deck started like dwindling down as people kind of got used to playing against it. And now at the top of the meta, people are like, oh yeah, Loki Airsham is good, isn't it? Let's start playing that again. Sure enough, it's at the top of the meta. This is the iteration that's working best. I like the Enchantress tech in this deck as well, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, It's just crazy. Can you imagine playing Loki on turn 1? That's a potential win condition, obviously. Crazy how good this deck has been. And so, honestly, if you're looking to play the best deck in the meta right now, and you want everyone you play against to cringe, this is the one. It's Loki Arishem. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate every single one of you, and we'll see you on that next one.